because I never imagined in my wildest dreams, number one, that you could just live on meat, and number two, that it would have such a salutary effect. That if she only ate beef, then all of her immunological symptoms disappeared. It's something to be 60 and to have the same essential body morphology that I had when I was 23. And that had all disappeared for me in my early 50s. And so I've only been eating meat for beef, fundamentally, for almost 5 years now. And I've talked to hundreds of people, and we've had messages from thousands of people showing that this is, first of all, radically effective as a weight loss strategy, and also seems to produce remarkable effects on the general disease symptom front. Back in November of 2021, there was a study published by a Harvard group, but they they assessed 2,500 people who'd been on a carnivore diet for 6 months and showed something approximating a 90% reduction in all disease symptoms. And it's the only scientific paper I ever read where the surprise of the researchers was palpable between the lines in the scientific writing. Because, in a scientific article, all that emotion, negative or positive, is pretty much ironed out. But these people were so shocked by what they found that it couldn't help leaking into the document. And so, well, this has been quite surprising to me, because I never imagined in my wildest dreams, number one, that you could just live on meat, and number two, that it would have such a salutary effect. So for me, I lost 52 pounds in 7 months. I went from 212 pounds to 165, which is exactly what I weighed when I was 23. And I've maintained that weight since. I can put on muscle mass with no problem, even though I'm 62. I had a host of inflammatory conditions, some of which were quite serious, including peripheral uveitis, which sometimes blinds people, in my right eye, and it disappeared completely, along with psoriasis and gastric reflux disorder, and, interestingly enough, gum disease, which is technically incurable, which is linked to cardiovascular degeneration, and which has gone away 100% in my case, according to multiple measures that my dentists have taken. And so when I've talked to many people who've lost like 100 pounds in a year, because they come to my talks, and who are just beside themselves, so to speak, as a consequence of experimenting with this diet. So it's something to be 60 and to have the same essential body morphology that I had when I was 23. And that had all disappeared for me in my early 50s. As you may or may not know, my daughter was very ill with a plethora of immunological problems, including very serious juvenile arthritis. And it just about killed her. It did destroy 2 of her joints, and she had another 38 that were affected. And so she was always in a lot of pain. And that if she only ate beef, and it turns out for her it has to be beef that isn't aged, then all of her immunological symptoms disappeared.
More restrictive diets, ketogenic diets, which are not as restrictive as what you're doing, are also very effective for weight loss. By the way, so is a zero-fat diet. Now, it's an unpalatable diet, and I don't think it's a particularly healthy diet when you start restricting fat that much. But the most interesting question to me is, what are the other foods out there that you might be able to consume? Or in the case of your daughter, right?
What I have found is that if I eat any of them, I start to crave them intensely. If I don't eat them at all, they don't bother me, assuming, and this goes to the calorie restriction issue, one of the ways of maintaining yourself on a keto diet or a carnivore diet, let's say, is to make sure you're never hungry. And I eat a lot of meat and a lot of high-fat meat, and so I'm never hungry. And I don't think that I'm calorie restricted at all, because, I can eat a tomahawk steak sometimes in one sitting, which is about 35 ounces of meat. I never get hungry, and I eat high-fat carnivore snacks too. What I found is as long as I'm never hungry, then I'm not inclined to cheat. But if I do try something like an introduction of carbohydrates, first of all, some of my symptoms come back right away, like the GERDs, and I start craving like mad. So that's my experience.
Is it all carbohydrates, or like, for example, if you introduce vegetables non-starchy vegetables, what happens, both symptom-wise and craving-wise?
Yeah, well, for a while I was eating nothing but meat and greens, but I still had some residual symptoms. My wife has a host of immunological problems that are somewhat low level, and I have a different host, and Michaela seemed to get all of them. And so, maybe we're absurdly sensitive for reasons that wouldn't be true of other people. But it's definitely the case that I do better. And believe me, this isn't something I particularly want. It is the case that I do better if I just stick to beef. Now, could I have pork and chicken? I had a very terrible bout of ill health, and I'm disinclined to do a lot of experimentation, although I'll probably try again in the future sometime. But I do know that beef works. We've been hypothesizing internally in our family, for what it's worth, is that the reason that beef works is because they process what they eat through so many stomachs that by the time it is actually turned into meat, there's pretty much nothing else there. So it's a very purified form of nutritional, a very purified form of food. Now, like I said, that's anecdotal, and this is partly why I don't talk about it. But I can tell you, after you've talked to 1,000 people who tell you the same anecdote, you don't have an anecdote anymore. You have a hypothesis. And it's really quite something seeing these people who show me pictures of what they looked like a year ago. And, they were carrying around an extra person with them. And they're still shell-shocked by the transformation, because it's really something to lose, say, 150 pounds in a year. And so, I don't know what to make of that. I do know that the diet has actually been rejuvenating for my wife and I. Like, its effect on muscle tone has to be seen to be believed. And that's true even though both of us are 60. Like, my wife is in better shape from a musculature perspective now at 63 than she was when she was 40. And she was a very physically fit person who was exercising constantly and who was in pretty damn good shape. And to see that reverse rather than just, stop deteriorating, I don't really know what to make of it.